Hello, everyone. Thanks for giving us your time today. This is VR Download, and I'm Ian Hamilton in New York, broadcasting today with David Heaney in London. I've just spent much of my weekend looking through comments from developer Andre Elijah, published a piece about court documents he filed in a case against Meta. You can check that out at UploadVR.com. And if you appreciate our presentation and the effort that went into that, please consider becoming a member. We'll also have the video interview that's in that article up on the UploadVR channel. Basically, in about 10-15 minutes, I think I have it scheduled to go up into our broadcast here. Some quick notes for our viewers. Myself and David Heaney meet each week here in the studio he built to discuss the next generation of personal computing. I'm using a Quest Pro right now with face and eye tracking. And David today is using a Quest 2. Last week, we recorded our review episode of Quest 3. Yeah, you're on Quest 3.
Yes.
I thought you were reverting to Quest 2 this week because of the massive amount of popping that our audience complained about last week. What are we doing about that? What's going on?
Yeah, we plan to look into that and see if there's some sort of software solution that we can provide. For now, we're just going to have to roll with it. This is what I have set up today. So yeah, I did explain that earlier in Slack.
Well, we've got a global audience, as always, and we love seeing where people are viewing us from. I'm already seeing everyone in our comments calling it out. It's amazing to see just what kind of reach. We've got a lot of people all over the United States, a lot of people in California, Sacramento, Fresno. I'm seeing the UK, Pennsylvania, Space Coast of Florida. Gosh, that's a cool place. I spent some time down at the space area down there. It's an incredible place. Love that area of Florida, and those alligators are terrifying. Yeah, so David, we have a lot to cover this week. It's been actually a big week for hardware and sort of software upgrades related to VR, and as well as just visibility of VR in general, right? So there's a lot of people putting their eyes on VR for the first time in years this week, and we're going to get into all of that. David, what do we have?
Yeah, so we're going to be talking about Quest 3 news, as well as some more speculative reporting on the potential next steps for Meta and for Apple. So we'll talk about the Quest 3's internal battery. We'll talk about the fact, I think some people were mentioning in the comments already, that The Verge has also reported on this, that some people are using Quest 3's pass-through in their daily life already, which is remarkable. We'll also talk about the experimental depth API that adds the ability to do dynamic occlusion in Quest 3's mixed reality, something that we were sorely missing in our review, and we pointed out the kind of issues with shipping a mixed reality headset without that. And then finally, we'll talk about those two big speculative reports. The report that the next Apple Vision headset, the cheaper model, could come in at around $1,500 to $2,500, but lack some of the features and have some spec downgrades. And then finally, we will talk about the report that Quest 3 Lite could arrive in the first half of next year with Fresnel lenses for between $200 and $300. So very fascinating potential next moves from Apple and Meta.
Yeah, and I'm seeing people in our comments kind of already going off on the various ways our discussion is going to go when we get to it here, right? Calling it cheaper. People prefer the word inexpensive, right? Cheaper implies that it's not going to be a quality product. We will see how it lands, right? I've always been a believer that both inexpensive and cheaper apply fairly when you're applying, to something that is going to be a step down from what you've already got, right? But that is where we're heading with VR, is a race to the bottom. I remember Meta Connect or Oculus Connect, I think they open source some of the designs of the original DK2, or maybe it was the DK1. But I remember Brendan Eri saying, knock your socks off, China, basically, to suggest all the knockoffs that we were going to have. Well, we did. We've done that already a couple times in VR, of running to the base possible unit of VR systems. So I will be curious to see, we're going to have a big discussion about what is the minimum viable package for VR. And that's probably going to be a big portion of our discussion this week. So prepare your comments, questions on what you think is the ultimate VR package, say come next year, 2024 technology. And yeah, we've got so many people from everywhere tuning in. Want to recap for everyone? We had an incredible review from David Heaney up on our site. If you want to go look at the Quest 3 review, some people might have missed that. Go process that review. It's very nuanced take. And yeah, everyone who's a regular viewer, King Jellofish, Clay, it's really cool to see just so many people getting into the rhythm with us of talking about VR, getting excited about it again, even when we need to kind of like put a real cap on the hype machine, right? At the same time that we're excited about this stuff. And that's what we're going to get into today.
Yeah, for sure. So let's start with that first story. The iFixit tore down Quest 3 to find out what's inside, and their primary job is to actually assess the repairability of all these products. So they gave it a 4 out of 10 for repairability, citing the lack of a repair manual, the lack of spare parts, and a design that isn't really designed to be repair conscious. But keep in mind, they've given low scores to quite a lot of VR headsets because these things are actually a lot more complicated than typical consumer electronic devices. There's a real sort of design philosophy here of packing a lot of components into a small space because, unlike something that you don't wear, wearable technology like this, all of the bulk and all of the weight really changes the actual end user experience. So this is something people really care about. But yeah, one of the fascinating takeaways here was that this battery is now 40% larger than Quest 2's. It's a almost 20 watt hour battery now. This is akin to the kind of thing you'd see in a laptop. And because of the 40% smaller visor and the larger battery, this is now a huge chunk of the internal size. And the person who did this teardown at iFixit has said that they're going to weigh the battery, but from some napkin math, we can say that it's somewhere around 20 to 25% of the visor's weight. So to be clear, not the entire weight, but of the visor's weight. So some people, I think, overstate what taking the battery out of the headset would do. Some people think, it's going to half the weight. No, you get a reduction of like 20 or 25%. That's not insignificant, but it's not the Hail Mary that a lot of people seem to think it is.
Really interesting thing. And I think we're gonna fold this discussion in. We're gonna get to that trade-off of removing the battery from the front of the headset and putting it elsewhere, right? I'm using a Quest Pro right now, which has a very different balance trade-off than even the Quest 2 and Quest 3. And then there's, of course, the Vision Pro, which does a completely different trade-off than either of them, right? Where it offloads the battery completely to your side. And then there's, the older AR solutions like Magic Leap that have processor also in the battery pack. And, that's a huge range of different things. And we're about to talk about some rumors about this Quest Lite that I think are going to be really interesting to fold into this. Are there any comments you want to talk about before we do that?
Yeah, there's two here. So King Jellyfish is kind of asking, they're asking about how pass-through affects battery. I think the larger question here that's being asked is, why does Quest 3 have a 40% larger battery than Quest 2? The first one is that, yes, processing all of these sensor inputs from the fact that this thing now has 6 sensors rather than just 4 and they're higher resolution draws more power. It also, the XR2 Gen 2 processor isn't only more powerful in its performance per watt, but it also has a higher peak performance. It actually draws more energy than Quest 2. So all of these factors come together to mean that this thing draws more energy. We also have someone pointing out a very valid fact. Robbie Dobb points out that the teardown found that the depth projector in Quest 3 actually fits perfectly into the empty slot for the depth projector on Quest Pro. That's fascinating. Not only does it fit into the slot, but the ribbon cable fits directly onto the connector. So we don't know this for certain, but it seems highly probable it's the same component and it was carried over. And just for anyone that's not aware, Quest Pro was supposed to have a depth projector, but it was dropped in the final months before its release. And it still has, if you open any Quest Pro today, there is still that empty slot and empty connector for it.
Yeah, so let's use that as the transition to the second subject on today's lineup here. So Meta has released an experimental Quest 3 depth API that brings dynamic occlusion into mixed reality. And funnily enough, we actually became publishers of VR apps, technically, for the first time ever, because David Heaney went and took the sample project that was released publicly for this feature, and we put it up on SideQuest for any Quest 3 owners that are curious to see exactly what this occlusion feels like and how it differs from the out-of-the-box experience. But why don't you dive into that a little bit more specifically, David?
Yeah, to be very clear, what we did was we just compiled Meta's sample. They released a sample of this on GitHub, which for a short time was the only piece of Quest 3 software that used dynamic occlusion. But obviously, not everyone wants to open Unity and build that, and there are even some strange build complications that I think Meta's development environment may be slightly different than everyone else's. So we just put that on SideQuest so that anyone can try it out. And if you're not familiar with what we even mean by the word occlusion, the general concept of occlusion is depicted very well in this meta diagram. So without occlusion, the virtual objects are rendered on top of all of the real objects. And obviously this looks absolutely terrible. With occlusion, they can be rendered behind. Now, Quest 3 today can do what's called static occlusion, where virtual objects can appear behind the scene mesh that you scan in when you do the room setup for Quest 3's mixed reality. The problem is that it doesn't currently in the public software have dynamic occlusion, meaning that if you raise your hand, your arm, or if another person walks in front of a virtual object, that virtual object will still be rendered in front of them. And we harshly criticize this in our Quest 3 review. The reason we did so is that Meta markets this as the world's first mainstream mixed reality headset. That's a big marketing claim, and we think that this feature is essential. So this is available as an experimental API, meaning that developers can test it and build with it, but they can't yet publish it to the Quest Store or App Lab. And you can see in this example, the person's arm now can occlude the virtual object. And the one thing we should say about this is that the depth map that the headset uses for this is very low resolution. So you will see spaces around your arm and fingers. You'll see the spaces between your fingers occlude the object, even though they should show the object. It's very rough, but it's better than not having occlusion.
Yeah, so I want to say it was maybe a month ago now. I sent a video to the team of Pokemon Go on an iPhone, and I inserted a Pokemon just onto a city street. He was, standing there on the city street as humans are walking between me and the Pokemon, as well as like behind the Pokemon. And you noted, you saw what I saw was that the occlusion out of one of the latest iPhones using the latest APIs is really, really good. It's that's some of the harshest conditions to throw at that sort of system, and the iPhone AR handled it beautifully. And I don't know how much of that was just Pokemon Go's technology versus how much of it was Apple's, but it's impressive and it's parallel to what this is doing, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's very important to point out that smartphones actually already do this, right, in their AR SDKs. What they do, as far as I'm aware, is they actually do person tracking. So they track your arms and your hands, and they track other people. Whereas this is an arbitrary depth map. I think ARKit and ARCore do have arbitrary depth mapping now, but I think given the resolution of this, it would be great if Meta could actually do a kind of person segmentation and your arm segmentation to solve this, because developers already can actually use the hand tracking mesh as an occlusion point, and you see that in the demo app firsthand. The problem there is, though, then it kind of cuts off at your wrist, so you see your hand in front of virtual objects and then your wrist behind them and the rest of your arm behind them. So yeah, the state of mixed reality software on Quest now is very rough and very early. I personally think they should have launched this thing saying should have described the entire mixed reality as experimental. And then a few months from now, they should have had this massive software update where they say Quest 3 is now a mixed reality headset too. I think it was far too premature of them to launch this thing with the fanfare of the first mainstream mixed reality headset, because the software just isn't ready. Even from an experience perspective, if you launch into a mixed reality app, you're in pass-through, you go into the app and you're in VR in a loading screen, normally completely blindfolded in blackness, and then you're brought into the app. And usually you're brought into the app's VR mode. You have to hunt through the settings and find the mixed reality mode. Quest 3 is still very much so a VR headset first, with some mixed reality features half-baked tacked on.
Yeah, so I've got lots of thoughts about this situation, right? And I saw people in our comments already referring to the Verge's report about people using mixed reality on Quest 3 out in public, going into public spaces with
Yeah, I think
this.
that's our next topic as well.
Yeah, I know. I think we need to get into it right here because this feature, number one, is necessary for it to be a good experience. Number one. So those people that are doing it in those videos for those purposes, I don't understand it other than they're trying to make something look great for social media, right? A great video for social media that is going to get across conceptually what these ideas might be capable of. But it's a really poor representation of, I don't know, the VR community, right? Like this is not what VR is right now. This is a really awkward social interaction in public, and this isn't actually usable as even if it looks good on video and gets the concept across about how this will work. But yeah, we're going to get into another subject. The next subject we're going to get into is going to even build on this a little bit even more. But David, I want to give you to give the breakdown of what you've seen shared just in the first few days of Quest 3 being out there. And then I want to talk about the other Meta headset that I've been walking around with in New York City in public that is very different from Quest 3.
Yeah, so I'm not sure I fully agree with you. I think there's two separate things going on here. So if people aren't familiar what we're talking about here, it's the fact that over the past week or so since Quest 3 has launched, there are some people that are uploading videos of them using pass-through in their daily life. Now, I think there's two different categories of video here. There's the one on the left where someone is using it in their own house. We've seen people doing cooking. We've seen people doing the chores, vacuuming and dusting. And the use case here is that they can have a browser window or two browser windows beside them as they walk around the house. They can be watching a YouTube video and have it magically follow them around as they are just going through their daily life. And that's something that you can't do with a smartphone or tablet. You would have to hold it and kind of move it around constantly and take your hands away from the chores that you're doing. So it's a very interesting potential use case. And, this video here, you can see it embedded in our article about this on UploadVR.com on the left. This guy actually does make soup. He's using a knife. He's cutting, he's cutting different vegetables. This is something that he's actually doing. And I think the video recording does hide a lot of the flaws with the pass-through, and in our review of Quest 3, we have been very clear about what those limitations are. But you can still actually do this. This person has done this without cutting themselves. They found a kind of interesting use case. I think some of the things around vacuuming, for example, these are still early adopters that are willing to put up with the pass-through quality today. This is not something that regular consumers are going to want to do. But Quest 3 is arguably the first headset where it's somewhat practical, where the early adopters could actually do this and not be hating it the entire time. They're not going to love it, but they're not going to hate it. Now, there's a second category of video, which is the kind of stunts or attention-grabbing occurrences to keep this neutral. And that's what you see on the right. So this is a former XR developer, 6Live, that has gone into a San Francisco coffee shop wearing the Quest 3 and ordered their coffee from a barista. And this is as Ian points out, this is something that people are not doing this for a practical reason. This is being done for social media attention and the same reasons that people kind of record workers at their during their job for social media attention. This is something that we don't endorse. It's definitely rude to walk up to someone with your eyes covered in a coffee shop and not explain to them first that you're recording and get their permission. But again, from a technological perspective, this is arguably the first headset that's completely standalone in which this is actually practical to do.
Yeah, so my 2 cents on this. I've been walking around New York City with Meta's second generation Ray-Bans sunglasses. Meta sent me a pair of them to review. I'm assessing them now. Been real busy with other things, so I haven't had a chance to write out those thoughts. So I'm going to give them to you live and discuss out some of these things. They're a pair of just sunglasses with transition lenses, so they're perfectly clear to see through until I go out into the sunlight and they shade a little bit as I'm going about. And then they've got built into them the language learning models, the AI assistant functionality that Meta has been working toward for a really, really long time. And when you combine those two things, the AI assistant with the camera glasses, you have two things to kind of lure people in to use the device where the first generation didn't have that. I'm seeing comments go down here, and I wanted to reply and just mention Vexner's comment. I do want to reply to Vexner's comment. Thank you for the donation, and we will try to do that. That's an excellent idea to compare basically human senses to where we are in VR right now. As people in our comments have pointed out, Michael Abrash has made those charts in the past. We should do it as a journalism organization to give people an idea of where all this technology fits relative to where it wants to be. So these glasses and the Verge wrote an article about what people are doing with Quest 3. And the Verge article mentions that people are walking around capturing with Quest 3, and they didn't expect it. They expected people to be going around doing it. They were hinting that people were going to be going around doing it with these. So I've been walking around with these glasses in a much more crowded scenario than I ever remember taking the first generation glasses around. And I don't know how to describe this uncomfortable feeling of capturing people when they're just hanging around doing their day, right? Like, I love capturing the beautiful view of the sunset, a walk through the park, the environment. Love There's cool activities I can do with like I can capture my cat. I did a ridiculous video, David. They advertised these glasses obviously with saying that you could do great cat videos. I had a plastic mask for like I don't know, giving a cat pills. I put it over in front of the glasses and then put cat food on the plastic frame. And so I've got a video right through the frame of the cat licking food right off this glass. It's the most ridiculous, stupidest video I've ever shot, but it's cool at the same time to see this ridiculous perspective of a cat licking food off this plastic frame. Those videos were impossible to take with the first generation because the camera was so bad. The camera is much improved here, but it's still a far cry from where we're getting with phone and modern day phone or even SLR cameras. But this assistant is a big reason to keep this headset on all day. And it is creepy as heck because you can record 1 minute of video and then ask Meta while the video is recording a question, and it'll generate an answer and try to do its best in a very guardrailed way to not give you bad information. It's slim. It looks right. It's got the brand name of the same glasses that everyone else wears. And I feel deeply uncomfortable walking around in public with these cameras, filming other people on the street. And people are going around with Quest 3s doing that?
Am I right in saying, I haven't got these glasses yet, but I did use the previous ones. Am I correct in saying that the LED is brighter, the recording LED is brighter and pulses now on this one, whereas the criticism of the first generation was that LED was very not bright, it was very dim. Is that something they've addressed here? That's what I've heard.
So I believe so. So there's a chart in their review guide. So we're going to get into this next week more in depth, and once I've got my ability to get the article out there in depth to explain all of this in a more structured way. But yes, it does feel like they've improved all the notification lights, including the internal notification lights, to tell you what the headset is doing, with sort of the periphery of your vision showing lights to let you know what the headset's doing. So the very first time I tried to invoke the AI assistant, it actually took a delay from me asking the question to reply. That was so big, I thought it didn't actually hear me. It took like an extra 2 seconds or something to actually spit back an answer at me. But it is perfectly capable of having answers to your questions while you're recording. And in the MetaView app, it actually has a whole pane of all your answers, all the generated answers, and you can give them thumbs down or thumbs ups or trash them so that they're deleted from your record. So you're actually from the looks of it to me, you're actually feeding back into the learning algorithms to teach whether these answers are actually useful in the real world while you're doing these things. Oh, a lot to process here. And yes, it is improved. And so what I was saying is, in the review guide and what I'll get to next week, hopefully I can provide a screenshot. They have a page of just all these notification lights that this headset puts out. And there's a whole range of them for recording, for notifying you, for letting you know that the AI assistant is thinking, stuff like that.
Yeah, and to be clear to people, this Meta AI, it is only available in the US, but it is using large language models. It is actually the same kind of technology you would see in ChatGPT. And so that thumbs up and thumbs down is that same kind of reinforcement learning from human feedback system that is built into ChatGPT. And the fascinating thing about these glasses to me is that next year, Meta says they will actually get a multimodal mode where they can talk about what they're seeing. So you can say, how many calories is in this meal while you're sitting at a restaurant, or you can say, what's that landmark over there, or you can say, look at this broken thing in my house, how do I fix it? And based on what it's seeing, it can actually describe that. And that's something we've seen arrive in ChatGPT, but it's very different to having that something that you have to take out your phone and take a picture of versus something you can invoke at any time with your hands free just by looking. So that really seems like it will change the product fundamentally when it arrives.
Yeah, and I'm seeing this comment, and I just need to address it and get into it at some point. I see Guy Godin in our comments, the creator of Virtual Desktop. Thank you for tuning in. Where did it go? Yeah, people talking about TikTok videos and whatnot, but the comment was essentially suggesting that there's no privacy in public, and that's an interesting sentiment in an abstract, in the most sort of like politically libertarian mindset, if that's what if that's your political persuasion. But there is a record of people getting punched in the face for wearing Google Glass a decade ago. And here are these excited VR early adopters doing stunts for TikTok views, for Reels views, for X.com views, and they're going to get punched in the face sooner or later. And it's going to make for a very well clicked video at the end of the day. And I don't like that cycle. Like it feels a little bit broken.
Yeah, I think the one thing I would say here, though, is that was 10 years ago. And since then, as you point out, there is this new TikTok culture where you walk around in the street in a city and you're likely to walk into at least someone recording themselves. You go into a gym and you're going to see someone recording themselves. The idea of this sort of omnipresent capture society is something that has sort of emerged since Google Glass launched. Google Glass also looked like a camera. It was really, really ugly. It didn't look anything like regular glasses. It had this sort of Borg looking design that was nothing like the Ray-Bans. I think there are arguments on both sides here, but it is odd to me for some people who are completely fine walking around a city where people are holding up their smartphones and recording them to have a fundamental issue with the idea of headsets and glasses capturing the same. Though again, for me, it's always been about the implementation of that recording LED. On Quest 3, it's a pulsing white. I think that's still the same on Ray-Ban. I really think Meta just needs to make it a bright red light. It needs to be crystal clear that this thing is recording if it is. And that's, I don't know why they're dodging that. I don't know why white is not the universal color of this thing is recording me. We right now can see a camera over there and I have a giant red light coming out of the camera that's looking at me to be crystal clear that this is recording. I think Meta just needs to be very clear about this.
It is a brand new area, right? And I think it's interesting in our comments and even here, right, we're on opposite sides of the Atlantic, and CCTV cameras are all over the landscape in London and in England overall. And it's not, even in New York, like there are cameras everywhere, but they're not they don't have the impression of being systemic or like government run. There's individually run camera CCTV systems by every organization out there. But you've also got this network of house-driven cameras that is run by Amazon, and they're willing to work with law enforcement to use those cameras to relegate people. It's not it's a complicated issue with other things to consider than just the legal precedent. That's what I'm seeing in our comments. There's social issues to consider here, and I don't. We are 6 months to year or two of videos being put on social media of a person on the street being like, I can record whatever I want, and they're getting punched in the face for doing what they think they have the right to do. And there's going to be people that are going to defend the person punching because the person punching had some justifiable or arguably justifiable reason for being in a public place and not having an expectation of being recorded, at least in the manner of the interaction.
I'm still skeptical we'll see that kind of punching in anything other than small isolated incidents. I just do think this is a very, very different world for Google Glass. I think the ring thing you brought up is a great point. You walk into a neighborhood right now and you're likely to be recorded by 15 different doorbell cams and security cams. These things have gone from being, recording to a little box in someone's home that they can bring up with analog technology to something that people can buy for $50 and access immediately, and it's all saved to the cloud. The proliferation of recording cameras and the acceptability of TikTok recording culture means that I just don't think we're in a world where people are going to get punched for recording in public anymore.
So I think it's happening all the time. It's less newsy as time progresses, so it gets repeated less often. It's the first few incidents that catch all the attention. It's not. I'm thinking we've already got places where phones go into silent mode, phones go into airplane mode, theater mode. It's a fundamental, people out there see there's a lot of value in having a camera in your pocket that can't be turned off. But I think there's going to be people beginning to discuss those sorts of issues of what places aren't cameras allowed as time goes on. I had this joke to you, David. Holoride, the app that we tried at CES at the beginning of the year, you get in there, you put on a VR headset, you drive around, and the world is mapped to what you see in the headset, such that you've got a nice, comfortable VR experience driving around. Billionaires could use that to ferry their workers out to their secret bases and keep their locations completely private. It's the most absurd possible idea, but VR headsets make the perfect blindfold. At the same time that they make a great surveillance device in the flip side, right, of everyone else. These are complex issues, multifaceted, and they're going to have deep social cultural effects that won't I understand your bets that it's not going to happen common, but I think I'm remembering drones becoming common for the first time, right? And there was video that circulated on the internet of someone punching a drone basically out of midair, right? What happened? Drones are now no longer allowed in that area. They passed a law, city ordinance to not allow drones in that area. Simple as that. I could see that same evolution happening over the next couple of years regarding things like this.
Yeah, I do think there's a difference in something that's in the sky and looking down in positions that people can't go. To record something with a headset or glasses, you still need to be able to have access to that area. You still can't record somewhere that you don't have access to. Drones kind of overwrite that. One of the last things I think I'll say before we move on, I think, to the Apple topic is the same thing I say a lot of the time, that privacy issues with VR headset cameras are brought up, which is that for me, the microphone has always been a bigger privacy issue than cameras. And this goes for smartphones and for glasses and headsets. And, I think, again, we're still in this world where I would much rather have someone record silent video of me in public than record audio of my conversation I'm having with someone in public personally. And why this is interesting is that I've actually seen in the past month 2 products that have been announced that is they're essentially pendants that you wear around your neck that record everything that you say or hear in your entire life and use AI to then give you a summary and allow you to ask questions. So you can say, what did my wife tell me this morning to get from the shopping? What did my coworker say in that meeting on Thursday? That to me is going to be a much bigger privacy conversation than glasses and headsets.
All right, so I want to talk about one of these comments here that just got me really laughing here because it's kind of funny. Can you change the camera to me or put it on both of us, David? So where is it? Did anyone get punched using their phone for Pokemon Go years back? So over the weekend, I had the Meta glasses with me, and my son had a soccer game. And I've got the Meta glasses on my head, and I've got my iPhone here, and I take videos of my son all the time, trying to score goals, block goals, whatever, the standard parent filming their kid behavior on the side with my phone out in front of me in a very visible act, pressing the record button over here, going up to a fence. And you go right up to the fence, put your phone up to the fence, and then the camera can fit through the fence, and you've got an unobstructed view. You can hit the zoom button on your camera and get a really nice video of your kid. I'm wearing the Meta glasses and imagining what the equivalent of that would be. I would have to walk up to the fence, hit the record button really, really, really close, and then just stay really still in the creepiest possible manner imaginable, right? Like I was laughing, imagining someone filming me doing that, and I stopped myself. But instead, there's people going out there in Quest 3 and obviously exposing themselves to that sort of ridicule on purpose for hits, for discussion, for let's have this fun discussion about why this is awful. It's just I wanted to paint that picture for people of the physical act of recording, letting everyone else know you're doing this thing, versus this weird interaction that happens if you try to record the wrong type of video with these glasses.
Yeah, they are restricted to your first person view. Do we want to talk about the Apple news now, or the Apple report, I should say?
Yeah, it's a good transition, because the Apple headset news is really the missing piece of the VR market. We've got the thing we'll get to last, which is indicating what we've got near term, but everyone wants to know, what is Apple's strategy for taking this device that is $3,500 in 2024, the Apple Vision Pro, and make it something that everyone wants to buy or can even buy. So, David, what do we know about that?
Yeah, so I think most people's reaction, especially most people outside of our bubble's reaction to the price of Vision Pro was, what the bleep? And obviously, $3,500 is not accessible for the vast, vast, vast majority of people. But last year, the reliable supply chain analyst Ming-Chi Kuo claimed that Apple was working on a more affordable Vision headset too, to arrive at some point in the future. Now, earlier this year, we got some details on that when Bloomberg's Mark Gurman reported that the way that they would bring down the cost for this non-Pro Vision headset is to use the A series chipsets that are in the iPhone rather than the M series chips that are in the MacBooks and iPad Pro. And the other way that he is now saying this could happen today is that they may remove the eyesight display. If you're not familiar with what that is, it's the feature in Vision Pro that allows other people to see a rendered view of your eyes. So
the alleged feature.
Well, Apple has officially announced it, but we have never seen it actually demonstrated. That is a very important thing to say. It is also rumored to be the reason that we have not seen Tim Cook wearing a headset yet, or other Apple executives. Reportedly, this feature is not actually finished and completed yet. So this headset is shipping in early 2024, next year, but this feature is reportedly not finished, which is fascinating. But yeah, so the idea here is that sometime in the next few years, Apple will come along with a $1,500 to $25 non-Pro Vision that is obviously at a much more affordable price. Still not, mass market pricing, but it's the same kind of pricing people would pay for a MacBook. Millions of people every year pay that kind of price for a MacBook. And the way they would do this is to use the iPhone chips and take out this eyesight feature, and presumably also use cheaper materials instead of aluminium and glass.
Clay Mann saying, I just put googly eyes on my Quest, which is much cheaper. That is, of course, the recommended suggestion from Palmer Luckey, the creator of the original Oculus Rift. He's on Twitter, I believe, making a very similar joke that you get basically 90% of the utility of having this external display simply by making a joke like that. It is the obvious thing to remove, right? Everyone looked at it and said this is the obvious thing to remove. It's also interesting to think of whether Apple would do anything in replacement of this really, really high-end display? Like, do you put anything on the front to simulate or let the person know that you're in VR? Like, could you put the shimmering thing up there to let people know that they're in fully immersive VR and do that with a very cheap display and not need the extra stuff to simulate your fake eyes for everyone in the room? Like, that's maybe 10 steps too far for just displaying that, letting people know that you're blocked off from the outside world. And then we, of course, need to discuss controllers as we get into the last subject here, but I'm not going to get into that yet.
Yeah, I do think that's an interesting question. Will they have some sort of indicator? I would imagine so. You say that this is the obvious thing to remove eyesight, but I'm not sure 100% agree, because when they were talking about it at WWDC, when they announced Vision Pro, they described it as the kind of an essential part of the product's development. And they said, one of the key things we wanted to achieve with this product is to let you still be connected to people in the room. Obviously, though, it does have a cost. And at the end of the day, if they want this to be a mass market product line, if they want to get this sold to other people other than wealthy early adopters, if they want to take some market share from Meta in the long term or other competitors that may emerge, they need to get the price down. And if you're someone who's going to use this in a single person apartment and you live alone, you would never get any functionality out of that eyesight. It would essentially be useless for you other than the few times you have people over while you're using it. So yeah, the thing about the A series chips, I've seen a lot of people kind of push back on this, but if you look at what Apple did with the iPhone 15 Pro, they actually put in a 6-core GPU into the A series chips. And it's very, very possible that by the time this thing ships, they will have actually closed the performance with the M2. So we may get an iPhone chip that has the same performance as Vision Pro, because this thing was originally reported to be coming in 2025, according to Ming-Chi Kuo's original report. But earlier this year, we saw a Financial Times report say that it had to be pushed back. So that may mean that it's in 2026, but that's complete, speculation for now. We don't really know. What I would say is it's very unlikely that we'll see this thing in the very near term.
Vern Rock saying Apple needs to go the X-Rail route and offshore for low weight. I've discussed this with you multiple times, this idea that if you disconnect if you have a phone that lives inside of a whole family of wearable gadgets, the phone can become a battery pack more often than not for the other devices. At the same time, that runs in the absolute face of 10 years of conventional wisdom in the VR space, where we learned that Gear VRs fail, partially because you have to use your phone that you use in everyday life to power the darn thing, and who wants to do that? I still think there's an interesting route to consider when we're talking about putting USB-C on every phone out there. It can already power an external device. And this idea that, like, what I need more than a phone with me is a giant power brick. And I think that's just going to build over time because we want these headsets to do more and more. Like, the power. What I find so interesting is, like, Meta showed this minimum viable product for VR, right? They said, let's do good VR on a smartphone class chip. They did it. They knocked it out of the park. They sold 20 million of them via Quest 2. And then they came in and said, let's do the Quest 3. But let's use a whole bunch of the processing power of an upgraded chip to process the physical world rather than improving the quality of the virtual world across the board. And I know that devs can choose, but, like, as a platform, they aren't reserving a bunch of performance exclusively for virtual reality.
I'm
Is
not
that
sure I
a
agree with that.
problem? Really?
I mean,
Okay, so explain how I'm wrong.
if you're in a VR app that is not using pass-through, you are using all that extra performance for VR. That's what we said in our review, essentially, that when you're not using pass-through, this thing is just a much more powerful, very excellent, because of its lenses and displays, VR headset.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think in some ways the problem with Quest 3 is it's too much of a VR headset rather than actually putting in the hardware and extra effort. Like we've seen with Vision Pro, it has a secondary chip to process the pass-through. It has much more sensors. I think it'll be interesting to see, does Apple compromise on the pass-through to get this Vision out at $1,500 to $2,000? They're going in opposite directions in that sense.
Yeah, and I'm loving the people in our comments noticing this big change that happened in our studio when I'm wearing the Quest Pro. They can see me thinking, right? They can observe me uh, for the first time as an audience. The moment when I'm trying to recall information, they see me point my eyes up as I'm trying to remember specific examples. It's weird to realize you can see that little bit more than what you can with a headset without the face tracking. Let's get into this last subject because it is the missing piece.
I think Ian just disconnected there. We'll just briefly hold on until he's back. Oh, I think we see Ian coming back now.
All right. I don't know how long I was gone. Let's get into this last subject,
Give him
David.
for
Why don't
5
you
seconds.
cover what we've got here from our last bit of news?
Yeah, for sure. So we have a very interesting report that claims to describe what Meta's next move is and on a much shorter time scale. So earlier this year, if you're familiar with UploadVR, if you're familiar with The Verge, you'll know that Meta's internal AR/VR roadmap leaked to The Verge. And in that roadmap, Meta described that they wanted to ship a new headset in 2024, next year, at the most attractive price point in the VR consumer market. So Quest 3 is obviously at $500, which is a lot more expensive than Quest 2, but Meta still sells Quest 2. And the question is then, what are they going to do about that? One of the options that people had considered was that maybe they're going to reduce the price of Quest 3 over time and then cut out Quest 2, but it sounds like that's not what's going to happen. Last week, Bloomberg's Mark Gurman, again, one of the reliable sources for the Apple news, has said that this headset looks a lot like Quest 3, but uses less costly components. And he actually described it as a mixed reality headset. But that's very strange because this week we have this Chinese analyst who has been reliable in the past about Pico announcements, called a lot of the Pico 4 launch details correctly, says that this will actually not be a Quest 3 like headset. This will use the old Fresnel lenses from Quest 2, have only black and white pass through, and be focused on VR rather than mixed reality. And this analyst is claiming that the product may be named Quest 3 Lite and launch at either $200 without controllers or $300 with controllers. And so this would essentially be a Quest 2, but with the XR2 Gen 2 chipset from Quest 3. While Meta may call this Quest 3 Lite, from everything I'm reading about this, it sounds like it really would be a Quest 2 Pro in the same sense of a PlayStation 4 Pro. The same optics, the same kind of pass-through, but a more powerful chipset.
Yeah, so this is the missing piece that I wanted to get into as we discuss the next couple of years, right? We get into this all the time. I want to recap. I want to mention my shirt, my outfit here. A lot of people have mentioned in the comments. Typically, I wear a suit. Suit is one of the free options in the Meta avatar selection system. I added that a while back to just make it easy. And I got really curious the other day and went through the Meta store avatar selector and I wanted to see what was for sale. And this outfit was the only outfit I could even see myself vaguely buying because it made me laugh. And it's from Stranger Things. It's the Eddie guy from Stranger Things, who's a member of the Hellfire Club, I guess the D&D group for the local high school in Stranger Things. Big character in season 4. And I was like, okay, yeah, Stranger Things is a big thing in my household. Let's buy the avatar. I wanted to see how much, I think it's $5. I think I spent $5 on this, which I had to just experience the pain of spending $5 once on like a virtual, maybe it was $3. I can't remember the exact price, but I had to feel the pain of buying an outfit for my virtual avatar just to see
Do you
how
want to maybe
horrible I
stand
felt
up a
about
little bit so
myself.
people can see the details there?
Oh no, I don't want to.
Without going
see.
too far, you don't want to break the illusion
Yeah.
of the fact you don't have legs. Yeah, I think they can see the details now.
Yeah. All right. Well.
Yeah.
So we talk constantly on the show about what is going to be cut out of these headsets. Meta cut face and eye tracking out of Quest 3, yet I'm using it right now with purpose for our audience. On Quest 3, they added the depth sensor that they cut out of Quest Pro. I have this sense, and I was thinking about it, I want to test it out on you live on the show and our audience and see if you agree with this assessment. I always feel like Meta's product launches are a public A/B test. That they are always A/B testing something with their hardware, and then they kill the test that doesn't work. Do you think that's a fair assessment of how they do things?
Absolutely, it is. Meta is one of the most data-driven companies in the world. You know, we've heard testimonies from people who were executives at Meta, who were their top engineers, not just in the AR/VR department, but throughout, saying that they, to a fault, relentlessly follow the data, and that's almost kind of the complete opposite philosophy of what Steve Jobs had at Apple, where he was all about, you can follow data all day long, but all that's going to do is extrapolate off from what people currently want, and you'll be missing out a real vision and kind of telling people this is what you need next and having an actual understanding of the future, because these are completely opposite approaches. And yeah, I completely agree with you. That is what Meta has been doing. We saw it with when Go launched. We saw it with the Rift S and Quest simultaneous launch. We saw it with Quest Pro, where they had cut that thing by a third its price at launch. But I think this product has likely been in development for longer than they'd be able to react to Quest 3. Though what this report seems to suggest is that Meta are bringing this thing forward and are looking to launch it early next year. I'm just going to respond to a few comments here. Firstly, Quentin saying that Ian made the gesture. Bingo. No, we cut the gesture out of the app weeks ago. I don't know what caused Ian to leave. Someone else is saying here that they think that Hard to Get is saying Quest 2 Pro is already here. It's the Quest 3. Strongly disagree with that. Quest 3 has these completely next generation lenses. It has color pass through. It has a depth sensor. It's a new generation. I don't think it's fair to call it just Quest 2's generation. We have some people here who are strongly against the idea of Fresnel lenses, but there's others that are saying, Kevin Brook, for example, is pointing out that what this would do is bring every new VR buyer onto the Gen 2 chip so that they can eventually phase out content for Gen 1. And I think that is the primary advantage of this headset. Whether we like it or not that this thing may use Fresnel lenses, people are still buying Quest 2 today. It is still being sold with Fresnel lenses. The only difference here is that whereas each of those people would be another person that developers and Meta need to support on the Gen 1 chip for years and years down the line, when they get rid of Quest 2 and sell this thing, they're then shortening that time horizon until they can drop support for Gen 1 and focus all in on Gen 2. And that's how we get bigger and better and richer and more graphical fidelity in our VR content.
But leaving 20 million Quest 2 buyers behind, as they've done in other previous iterations, right? I'm seeing D1360VR suggesting that Fresnel plus OLED, so OLED's obviously display type that's self-emissive, and you get real, true contrast black colors that actually look like night. So you go into a night scene, it feels like night with an OLED. That makes sense. It is a good combination. But remember, this is a rendering, right? Of course, we have to put that out there and just repeat that this is a complete artist rendering. The idea behind this is going to be relentless cost cutting. Cut everything you possibly can out of the thing and make it the cheapest VR. Do VR the best at the least possible price. You do the XR2, you do the Fresnel lenses, you do a display that is just, you can get it at the lowest possible price. And then you start wondering whether you include the controllers or not. How many developers does Meta get to adopt dual mode input by the time this device hypothetically launches? Is it enough, right? Do people go and get the headset and get disappointed when they realize they can't go play Beat Saber right out of the box if it doesn't have controllers? I had this whole debate of just thinking about, well, what if they had one controller? We talked about this at length. In the past history of VR, there were ambidextrous controllers. The Vive wands, the very first 6-DoF controller to ship, ultimately had they would sync as right and left, but they were ambidextrous. You had grip buttons on either side of the controller. You saw, was it Ryan with Golf Plus suggesting that including one controller in the box, one track controller in the box, would be infinitely better than no controllers. And that's true. And it gets to the exact issue that we're worried about with Apple Vision Pro of whether gamers will have anything to enjoy on that system without having at least one tracked controller. And yeah, where do we get next year about where this gap is between these two platforms, right? Are we really going to be like $3,500 for Apple Vision Pro with a whole bunch of accessories to take you up to $5,000? And then Meta shipping a $200 device that could be $300 with controllers as the entry level? Like, that is a huge lead for Meta for years. Like, I can't imagine anyone getting close to a Quest 3 at that price with that content library. It'll be rough to compete with that, won't it?
Yeah, but if you sell the headset at 200 without the controllers, you don't get that content library. You get a small fraction of that content library. And I actually am just going to say this. I don't believe they will ship this thing without controllers. That's a big bet for me to make here, but I'm saying it publicly. I don't think they'll do it. Let's be clear that both of these reports, Gurman from Bloomberg and this Chinese analyst, have only said that Meta is considering or exploring shipping it without controllers. I am sure it is the most passionate area of debate at Meta because they do see that possibility of, look, we do it without controllers and it's $200. But I just don't think that they're there yet. I don't think that they can provide enough value that people would actually want to buy that. I think if they do it, people will end up buying the $300 headset more, or you will just get tons of complaints and bad reviews.
Is there, why not? But again, like, this is why it's such like, by the time this ships, can you ship one controller?
Well, which one do you give them? The left or the right, or do you have to get?
That's where we talk to the ambidextrous. Yeah, no, you pick one out in your checkout system.
But oh, sure. Well, that's complicated and actually drives the cost up if you have to then package in a controller separately from when someone's purchasing it. You're not going to do that for 200. But let me just finish here. The other problem is if you build an ambidextrous controller, the problem is then you can only support hand tracking apps and apps which are built for one controller. You still have to buy the touch controllers if you want to get the vast majority of content on the store. The Beat Saber, the Golf Plus, Golf Plus is something you would get with one controller. But all of the kind of apps and games that people want, you'd then have a third controller that you have sitting there wasting, money and space. You'd have to get all of these developers to support it, and you would still be a subset of the store. I don't think it makes sense. I think they'll either ship it with or without Touch Plus, but if they do it without Touch Plus, they're not ready yet.
The one controller feels like the obvious sort of middle ground if you're trying to transition people to the new system at the same time you're pushing dual mode input. So to be clear about what dual mode input is, you've got an experimental setting, I think, on Quest Pro right now. Is that right? Where you can show the hands gripping the controllers. People in our comments talking about the various games that you can do with one-handed mode. You can even do Beat Saber, right, in single saber mode, and that's obviously a game that's owned by Meta, a first-party game that they can choose to push single saber mode as like the default experience.
I think you lose the game at that point. You lose the game. If Beat Saber is not the same if you're hitting it with one saber.
But your other hand is waving around in the air. You could do something else with it. And you could add a new game mode. All right, I'm not defending it, right? It was a huge sacrifice to lose. It would be a huge sacrifice. Meta has shown they're willing to do huge sacrifices. And the one thing that I think was the Fresnel lens thing is such an interesting thing to think about them like doing for cost-cutting purposes, because it would be the first time in kind of Meta's ecosystem where they've aligned on one chip platform, and now they're differentiating by something other than storage size, right? You could still probably go and get this system in minimum storage or higher storage, and you can go and get the Quest 3 probably with minimum storage and higher storage, just like you can do the Quest Pro. But this would have a different visual experience than the higher priced device. And that's a pretty big step for Meta to consider in differentiating their product lines. And I want to call that out as well before we move on.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so torn about the idea of using Fresnel lenses here. On the one hand, people are not going to buy a $500 Quest 3, no matter how good it is, in the same numbers that bought Quest 2. A $500 product is just, let's all be honest with ourselves, it is not in the same market category as a $300 product. The Quest 2 sold 20 million units. For the vast majority of its time, at $300. And that, we say 300 because these companies all sell their products at $299.99, and we like to be honest, but the consumer psychology here is $299, and that's something that just you cannot achieve at these kind of price points. But the thing I would say about the no controllers argument is, to me, the appeal of a no controller device like Vision Pro and a potential Quest is to use it for these kind of traditional use cases where you're watching 2D content on a virtual monitor. And what strikes me is that Quest 3 would be the headset you would want to do that with. What I don't understand about the idea of selling this without controllers is, why not sell Quest 3 without controllers then? Why can't I buy a $400 Quest 3 without controllers? And why can't that be the budget alternative to Apple Vision Pro? If this thing has black and white pass-through, the only time you would be using hand tracking in it would be realistically in VR apps, where it makes most sense to take advantage of the immersive capabilities of hand controllers. It seems like a strange product mismatch. We just lost Ian here. I think he's coming back soon. I think it's just connection issues. So yeah, Delicious is backing up what I said in the comment here. They are saying the Fresnel lenses are not good enough for watching content. I agree with that. The difference that Pancake lenses make cannot be understated. It feels like the next generation of headsets. Once you try Pancake lenses, you can't go back. I love some of the games on my PlayStation VR 2, but I can't enjoy them the same way now that I have a Quest Pro and a Quest 3 that have these new lenses. The ability, the clarity and sharpness, not even at the periphery. The periphery is remarkable, but even in the center is just on a new level. I really do think that we will look back at VR display systems and describe, a Spheric and Fresnel as Gen 1 and Pancake as Gen 2. And it would be such a shame for a whole new generation of people to be introduced to VR through Fresnel lenses.
Yeah, but at the quality of like the visuals, like we just put up a story about Doom 3 getting shadows, and Doom 3 is night and day with the shadows. Like, it feels like a completely different game when everything can jump out at you with that kind of believability, or when you've got the flashlight to use in your environment in such a believable way. You could get that on this device instead of having to go down to, a lower frame rate. It would be fantastic to have. I want to go back to everything else we were discussing and talk about Vision and Apple Vision Pro. There was the comment here saying that Apple is starting from a controller-free experience. That's why they get to have this fresh start, and why it complicates all of our discussions wishing for some kind of tracked physical object to use with a variety of games. A couple things I wanted to convey in addition to my argument that we do one controller, right? If Meta is able to separate the controller from the base package of a Quest, you can now start selling a charging case with the controllers bundled, right? You could sell the Touch as a charging unit separate to the headset itself. So you put your Touch in a bag and you put your controllers in a bag, or your headset in a bag separate if you really wanted. You could do that with both a Pro model and the Touch Plus model as a cheap end model of doing the same thing. But it is a problem with controllers is keeping them charged. They should come with a charging case to begin with. I just want to make that argument that separating them frees us up to do that.
I still would say what I said last week when you brought this up, which is that the majority of people are going to use their Quest in the same room of the same house forever, and a case is not something that crosses their mind. A dock, which we will have a review of either later today or sometime later this week, is a very different proposition there. And, they do sell that, and that's something that I expect. The problem with the cheaper Quest 3 Lite is that it probably won't have those gold charging points in the bottom, so they won't actually support the same dock. So that's something that if they're going to relentlessly cut costs, that's not going to be there.
So the other context I want to just add here is, right, I just added 2 new headsets to my house. I have two new Quest 3s. So one for work and one for my family use. I've got a PSVR 2. I've got the Quest Pro. I even got a big screen beyond to test continuously with some stuff. They're all cool in different ways, but I keep coming back to, like, what's the one I'm going to pick up every day? Which one am I going to use, and what scenario do I want to use it in? And I think everyone that thinks about Vision Pro thinks, how am I going to play the game I love inside of it, whether it's Beat Saber, Pistol Whip, a shooter game. Um, you don't have controllers. How am I going to play it? Why is it a compelling platform for me to think about it? It's a non-starter because of this whole controller issue. But here I am with Quest 3 and Quest Pro in my house, and my Quest Pro, the left controller, my dominant hand refuses to pair with the headset for months now, and we've got multiple emails in our inbox of people saying my Quest Pro is having problems. Can you figure out what's going on with it? I have a bricked Quest 2 in my house right now. I know a lot of people out there are struggling with their old devices getting, useless right around them. What it's caused for me is this really weird situation where all I want to do is have my Quest Pro ready to go with one controller to go into Walkabout Mini Golf. That's my preferred, it's either that or I want to come in here and talk to you with just hand tracking only. That's my preferred go-to use case for VR right now, is those two things. And that means all I want is a headset that's charged and ready to go anytime I want it, and a controller that's charged and ready to go anytime I want it. And I love Walkabout Mini Golf enough that I've even got the controller handle, the golf club handle to stick the controller in, and even have the grip. It's a cool accessory of the Hello Real accessory. I think they're sold out right now, but they've got a button on the side of it where you press the button on this, and it's connected by a little cord up to the grip button on the controller. And so you'll never mishit a ball in Walkabout Mini Golf. You go turn on the grip to button again, and only when you press this trigger will you actually putt the ball. So you can practice a lot better. If you're a golfer, this is the way to play in VR. I want that package. I want that package for $200 or $250. And I'm convinced that is a package that will sell to a lot of people. And I'm trying to imagine
what package to be crystal clear?
A headset, one controller with dual mode hand tracking. There's so many games that support
it. It's useful. I don't think there's so many games. I think, Walkabout Mini Golf is a great example for anyone playing the VR download bingo drinking game. I feel sorry for you. We've had Walkabout Mini Golf probably 10 times and Pistol Whip as well in this episode. So sorry about that. But yeah, I think there are these limited apps that work with it. Golf is a perfect example because you're holding one thing. Table tennis is another example. But I don't think those are the majority of apps. I don't think it's going to really change a huge purchasing decision between someone getting a controller versus two controllers. If it's $50 for one controller, or if you actually look at the packaging costs and the fixed costs of selling these things, that's not even how it's going to work, because right now a single controller is something like $80 to buy. So if you're going to buy a dual controllers, they would probably package that at 100 to put them together. But there's just not this extreme cost saving between shipping from Meta to you, one controller versus two. If you're going to get controllers, they might as well ship you two at that point. And you can just pick up the one you want. And because it's one for each hand, it actually ergonomically fits to your hand rather than this kind of horribly unergonomic thing like the Vive ones.
You're somewhat correct. But I want to point out to patents that Meta had over the years to store a gamepad inside the other, the housing of the headset, either on the front or the side. I think there's a way to send a headset with one controller in the iBox, in my opinion, and that's your carrying case right there. But again, I don't know if they're ready for that.
Don't need a carrying case. They use it in their living room and they never move it anywhere else. It's like a games console.
What I'm saying is the charging stand that we're going to review is a huge step forward for usability. And Meta has, progressively in each upgrade, found ways to make the whole package of you getting the minimum viable thing easier. I'm not saying that they're going to do this overnight or they even need to do it in this generation. But it is incredibly valuable to ship a smaller package with these things as add-ons. A Quest with controllers that are ready to go is such a cooler, better experience than a Quest with just open air hand tracking. No one is disputing that, right?
Yeah, and that's why I think they're going to ship Quest 3 Lite with controllers at $300.
Yeah. $300. Yeah, we'll see, right? We'll see if they can do the without touch option too. I
But I
think they'll
still
get
don't
there.
understand, why don't they do that with Quest 3 then? Why can't I buy Quest 3 for $400, given that it's the headset that makes sense to not have controllers, because you have that depth
Yeah, their
projector for.
software platform isn't ready. It's a complete shambles, and that's the other element of this that
It's not going to be ready
I
in
want to
six
go full
months, though.
circle.
If
Eh,
this thing's supposed to come in the next 6 months, it's not going to randomly be ready by then.
Well, no, that's exactly what I'm getting at here. Meta like, all right. So going full circle with Andre at the beginning of the show, mixed reality, all of this stuff, and where we're going with everything. Meta just spent the last 2 years telling everyone from Quest Pro to Quest 3, mixed reality is our big new push for development, right? We're exploring what mixed reality does, what games work in mixed reality, and we're going to fund a bunch of content for mixed reality. I really question right now whether Meta has hit a dead end on mixed reality. Vision Pro's mixed reality, the quality of its pass through is so good. I don't know whether Meta can close the gap to catch up in that content sphere for at least 2 to 3 generations. Like, it's going to take them a long time to develop whatever they need to develop to bring their pass through mixed reality quality up to where Apple is. That's my theory, at least.
Well, in the mainline Quest, I agree with you, the one that sells for $500. But reportedly, Meta is working with LG on a Quest Pro 2 to arrive in 2025. Now, that would only be a year or so after Vision Pro. It will reportedly be $2,000. So it'll be competitive in price with the non-Pro Vision that Apple is reportedly going to ship. And yet it'll have. I'm confident that Quest 3 is close enough and shows the fundamental technologies that for $2,000 in 2 years from now, Meta can ship a headset that has that quality of pass through, if not better, given some of the advancements in technology that will be at that time. Let's just go through
So,
an interesting comment here from Christoph Rona, who says that there's a possibility that Quest 3 Lite, while its pass through is black and white, it may actually have much higher resolution pass through than Quest 2. So you may get this strange semi-usable pass-through for things like reading your phone or checking, phone notifications, checking your PC, or lifting up a glass, because it doesn't have color, but it's actually clear enough that you could see your phone. I could definitely see that happening because, we have that on PlayStation VR 2 already, which is a fascinating kind of weird pass-through to have.
so a lot of comments and discussion about the price difference, about how they're not competing with each other. It's, all of that is very, very relevant. The 1/7 the price issue. Exact, and I'm so appreciative you gave that context of, yeah, this next Quest Pro 2 could compete directly head on with what Vision Pro is doing. The reason I'm like, for users, the story won't be too unclear, but for developers, this is why I brought up this mismatch. Meta just spent all of this time and money getting developers ready to support mixed reality on their platform. And arguably, the mixed reality part of the platform doesn't have a bright future in the next year or so. And so, all of this oomph from the VR market towards mixed reality apps, Laser Dance is this incredible game, right? I love this idea that they're doing with Laser Dance. You have a whole, it measures your room and then puts lasers across your room, and you've got to move through them just like you're in an obstacle course or something with lasers, just like you've seen in the movies for decades. Um, Great game, but if the Quest 3 doesn't have mixed reality, why why would it be focused on mixed reality mode at all? Why would Laser Dance focus on that at all? Like, they would want to ship a VR mode for Laser Dance with it all focused on VR, and maybe you only use it for the very first seconds of setup. Whereas for a while here, we've been doing Laser Dance in mixed reality and seeing the environment. It's it's a it's such a it would be such a setback for devs who have invested in what Meta told them to invest in, I guess, is the way I'm putting it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point and absolutely true. If 6 months from now Meta comes out with a $200 or $300, whatever it may be, Quest 3 Lite that has the same VR capabilities of that next generation chipset, but doesn't have the mixed reality color pass-through, that is going to murder developer momentum for mixed reality on the Meta ecosystem. That means that why on earth would you want to target only the couple of million people who have a Quest 3 when there are, maybe 10 plus million within a year or two people who have the Quest 3 Lite? And obviously, if you also make your game available for Quest 2, you have all of those people for VR. That means that what I think we'll see happen is what's already kind of happened with Quest 3, which is that a lot of the mixed reality games we have are actually just modes within VR games. You go into the menu and you have, solo, multiplayer, and then there's another option of mixed reality mode. And it's almost just like a mini game that game is built. We've seen that happen in quite a few games now. That's probably what we're going to see. Developers will still be able to build around mixed reality if they want to. They'll just have to target the Vision Pro audience and the Quest 3 audience, but miss out on that huge other audience. And as you always point out, where is that going to leave Meta's developer funding? Is Meta really going to want to fund content for only their $500 headset when you have tens of millions of people on the VR only headsets?
So if this picture, this pure speculation stuff we're putting together holds any weight, this starts to explain why there was why people thought there was so little gaming at the recent Connect conference. If Meta wants to save its push, its dollar spend in VR games, you save it now for the XR2 Gen 2. You don't put anything else other than what you're forced to on the XR2 Gen 1, and that would entirely explain what we saw at Connect, wouldn't it?
Yeah, Assassin's Creed Nexus and Asgard's Wrath 2 may be the last cross-generational titles that are designed to run on Quest 2 and the Quest 3 series. If we do truly get within the next 6 to 9 months a Quest 3 Lite that has that next-gen chipset, it cannot be long before we see games that are designed only for that chipset and aren't restricted by Quest 2. And some people, see that as a tragedy, and I understand that argument. But at the end of the day, by then, Quest 2 will be almost 4 years old. This is a rapidly moving industry. People will have that option, if all of these rumors are true, for $300 minus what they get for their Quest 2 on eBay or wherever, to upgrade to the next gen. They can just go with the same lenses and the same kind of architecture from the visual system, get to that new chip for as cheaply as possible. I also think that, with controllers, it's probably going to be those Touch Plus controllers. So you're still going to get the advantages of the new chip. You're still going to get the new controllers, but you miss out on the pancake lenses and mixed reality. I think that'll be a great upgrade path for people who get stuck on Quest 2.
All right. I had an idea. I'm ready to get destroyed about it. And I want to make sure our audience understands why we do this the way we do, right? We speculate, but none of these ideas we're attached to. I don't have any investment in them necessarily succeeding. What we're talking about are various ways of these companies attacking the future. And what I would love to see is two great options for people to go out and buy, right? I would love for people to go out and have a choice of two great platforms to choose from, at least. I would love for them to have a choice between more. And all we debate about on the show is, how do both of these companies get to having a strong platform? If you go rewind the tape, we were doing this with Pico too, when Pico tried with Pico 4, and the whole time it's like, where's the game investment? Are they actually going to get a game library that competes with Quest? And they announced one exclusive and then walked away. So that's the ongoing conversation that we're always going to have here. Getting that out made me forget my topic. I want this device. It sounds like a really interesting, compelling device. If it actually ships, it sounds more like, I didn't think the Switch Lite. Like, you have to say, it's really painful to sacrifice the ability to put the Switch in the dock. Like, that is a really cool thing. It's why it was named, is because of that feature. And then they took the feature out in the Lite version. So it's funny to imagine the parallel here for Quest 3 doing the same thing.
Yeah, I think that is a great point. It is just it's so difficult for us to, as people who have got pancake lenses, to accept that there will be, if this device does ship, years in which the new experience for the majority of new VR buyers is still those Fresnel lenses. I really wish there was some way they could have shipped something that's a midpoint of these headsets that use pancake lenses with a single panel, though I'm starting to suspect perhaps there are inherent engineering issues that mean you can't use a single panel with pancake lenses. I mean, you would end up using a lot less of the panel because of how close they have to be anyway. So maybe that's just a trade-off that just doesn't work yet. But yeah, we should obviously be clear that all of this is based on reports that are claiming to know what Apple and Meta are doing next. Neither Apple nor Meta have announced anything beyond their current Quest 3 and Apple Vision Pro. These companies could change their plans at any times. That has happened in the past. All we know is that these are the possible next moves from these companies.
Yeah, I think we should close off on something I want to ask you a question live on the show, David Heaney, that is going to hint at articles we need to get out later in this week or soon. And so my fundamental question here for you, David Heaney, is if somebody came to you and said, should I get a Quest 2 right now, what would you tell them?
Absolutely not. If this, based on what we're hearing, based on the fact that a Quest 2 is using a 3-year-old chipset that will soon be 4 years old, that's a terrible decision. If you're someone who wants to buy in at that price, wait 6 to 9 months to see whether this Quest 3 Lite rumor is true and buy in. Don't buy a 3 to 4-year-old chipset. Now, that's
And I'm seeing
people are pointing out in the comments that on the used market, that can be a much, much different equation. That's got to be down to whether you're personally comfortable with the fact that headset may potentially not be supported by content in a year or two from now.
Yep. So look for that with us soon. We've had a very, very big week, and thank you everyone for tuning in. We'll be announcing our next showcase very, very soon with a date in December. And I want to just make that pitch again that you come to uploadvr.com and become a supporter, a member, support our work as we try to push back at some of the overall trends in media, personal computing. We are trying to have nuanced discussions, in-depth discussions, and trying to represent these situations facing the little people, the developers, the users who are using these devices that are rolling out, being pushed into reality by these big platforms. We want to make sure we ask the really hard questions to the biggest, most powerful people, and we need your support to make that possible. So thank you all for tuning in with us on this journey. Thank you for coming in with us week in and week out, the amazing questions in our discussion, and for trusting us to bring you the news. And thank you so much for the time. We'll see you in the future.
Thanks so much, everyone. We really appreciate the high quality discussion in the comments as usual. Thank you so much for watching. And yes, we will be back next Tuesday for even more, including a review of that Quest 3 charging dock that we referred to a lot.